Thanks, Chris. Let's just get right into it. This video is going to be talking about upcoming Kickstarters. Now, there's a couple different videos you can put out there, but upcoming Kickstarters of 2021 that I am most anticipating. That is not to say the games that are going to make the most, the games that are going to, create the most hype, the games that I think have the most potential, that are most interesting to me. There are a lot of games coming out in 2021. I mean, the majority of them, let's be honest at this point, we don't really know what they are. We don't know especially when they are going to happen. That is the big conundrum. And so unless you're an insider on some of these channels or people are hyping it up in the back channels that I don't know about, not very many games have really been announced time-wise for 2021. When I was looking it up the other day, scrolling through Board Game Geek, going through as many, pages as I could, the vast overwhelming majority of them do not have a date announced, do not even have a quarter announced. I was able to divide them up a little bit into quarter one, quarter two, but there's nothing beyond that, and there's a lot of big unknowns because especially some of the bigger projects, I think there's a good chance you could be even talking the end of 2021 rather than the beginning. So with that all being the preamble precursor, let's talk about a few that are not going to be on my list, but that if you are of any interest for these, you should at least know about them in the first place. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Later this month is the Vindication Chronicles expansion, the latest expansion for the Vindication game, which is sort of a splattered on initial take of an Amerithrash, but it's actually a cleverly designed worker placement game. It states that it's a highly strategic fantasy-based tabletop journey for 2 to 5 players, but in all practicality, it really is more of a worker placement, feigning as a Amerithrash game. Now, that's not to say it's a bad game at all. I just think you need to know what you're getting into for that game. And it's relatively well thought of in terms of reviews. It won a couple awards on Board Game Geek, Board Game Quest Awards for Best Small Designer, Best Small Publisher, that sort of thing. Its overall rating on Board Game Geek right now is 7.9, which again is really good. It's on the higher end of things, especially from Kickstarter. There's already one expansion out, Leaders and Allies, and this is another expansion. It's coming out on December 9 on the Kickstarter, so shortly after this video will be posted, it should be right on Kickstarter. You'll be able to see firsthand what it all comes with. I think it's been a little bit hard to get because it's been out of print lately, but if you're interested at all, you should be checking it out. Another game that should be on your radar for January 21, so your post-Christmas Kickstarter funds should already be preparing yourself for the expansion for On Mars. And this is the Cooperative expansion, I believe. On Mars is one of Lacerda's most grandiose, complicated worker placement type games, and for the people that love heavy, I've heard it's really good. Now, it's way too heavy for my personal taste. You'll never see me play it because I just have no interest and no ability to focus on that side of things. But it's going to be probably a must-have for the people that are already heavy into it and that are looking for more of a cooperative game rather than just competitive. How big a market that is, I don't know, but it's going to get the deluxification, so you know you're going to pay the extra money because that's what the original had as well. The other big worker placement that is already receiving hype, I saw Man vs. Meeple hyping it up already as one of the best worker placement games they've played, something along those lines, is Darwin's Journey. Darwin's Journey being Darwin himself journeying, discovering new species, the evolution of species, that whole take. Now, what they're saying here is that the worker placement is going to be a little different. You have to have progression in your worker placement, meaning you have to do certain actions to allow you to unlock further actions in the game to progress further as you're going through Darwin's memories of the Galapagos Islands and his discoveries there. Again, as a worker placement, I have no interest, but if they're already hyping it, and I saw them actually hype it last month, it must be worth checking out because they're not going to say that for no reason. They're going to have something to back that up. So again, worker placement, you should be checking that out. Whether or not it's for you is a whole nother matter, but it should be on your radar. The other thing that should be on your radar is if you like hard games. The latest expansion for Robinson Crusoe is coming in February 2021. And I think that's been long awaited. So if Robinson Crusoe, especially the solo gamers out there, that has always been a big hit with them in terms of the difficulty, in terms of the action progression, that should be on your radar. The last one I'm just going to mention very briefly is the latest T game from David Tascini and David Spada. And this one is actually coming out, I believe, in April 2021 on Kickstarter, which the other T games really haven't. The Teotihuacan, the Tekhenu, both of those have been straight to retail. So I'm not sure what's different about this one and why the Kickstarter. But again, from a heavy worker placement, from a mitigation, from an overall strategic standpoint, his games are spot on and they are in line with what you would expect. And I imagine that this one is going to be no different. Now, let's get to the good stuff. This is going to be my top 10 of the ones that I am most hyped about. This is going to be a variety. And as I said before, some of these have tentative dates. Most of them do not. Most of them are just marketed as sometime in 2021. A couple of them we're crossing our fingers on and going, okay, I hope this actually posts in 2021 so that we can, sometime get it in 2022. Now, I usually don't go for his games, but here at number 10, we have Ryan Laukatt's next game called Exile. Now, the only question I have is their previous campaign, Rift Knights, was just canceled, even though it funded successfully because it wasn't hitting the stretch goals fast enough. So they decided to cancel it and relaunch it at some point because Rift Knights is significantly different from what their core base has been used to. And the people that are, you've got your CMON fanboys, you've got your Awakened Realm fanboys, you've got your Level 99 fanboys, but you've also got your Ryan Laukatt sort of fanboys as well. The Sleeping Gods is coming out soon, I think. Should be out anytime, maybe the beginning of the year. From Kickstarter standpoint, you can pre-order it as well, but I don't know how the timing of Rift Knights is then going to affect this or not. There's not really hardly any information about Exile out there right now. On the Board Game Geek page, if you go to it, there's not even a picture yet. The other interesting thing, and the other reason I'm tying it into Rift Knights, is because it sounds like it's something different than the Laukatt games in the past. Now, interestingly enough, the Board Game Geek page actually has it titled Exile, but if you read the text summary below, it actually says Now and Never, because it's a generational game. And this seems more like a campaign type game rather than some of the other ones they've done in the past. So maybe more akin to Sleeping Gods rather than some of the other Red Raven games. What you're doing is you're taking a character, you're choosing one of 4 asymmetrical characters, and you're basically living out their life. Their life in the village, you're going to work, you're going to defend the village, you're going to build the village, you're going to take all of these different actions. Now, like a lot of the other Laukatt games, it has a storybook mode and just sort of a regular mode. You have a storybook that you're going to be using to explore and make choices and have more of a narrative side of things, sort of like Sleeping Gods. And so I have to wonder what is going to be the difference between this and Sleeping Gods? And what is the timing of this going to be in terms of the Sleeping Gods delivery? Because if you're from a marketing standpoint now, let's shift gears a second. If Sleeping Gods is really as good as people think it's going to be, then what you're going to do is you're probably going to launch the Kickstarter while the hotness is still striking with Sleeping Gods. But that means shunting Rift Knights aside again, which, frankly speaking, I wasn't impressed by anything overtly Rift Knights. It was fine. It was generic. It didn't really seem stand out among the crowd in that type of asymmetric one-on-one strategic tactical game. But I don't know what's going to be done with this. And just from reading the Board Game Geek page right now, I can't really tell how this is going to be standoutish in terms of gameplay from, just even their own Sleeping Gods versus a lot of the other narrative games. So, the artwork's going to be beautiful. The gameplay is going to be present, but what is going to make it stand out to be different enough? But because I know of the track record that they have overall as being good, I'm going to have my eye on it. Now, frankly speaking, I probably won't back it because I haven't gotten any of their other games and none of the others really appeal to me because they tend to be more narrative worker placement-esque rather than thematic tactical type games. So, like I said, I'm going to keep an eye on it, but we'll see. Number 9. This is probably one you've never heard of either. Now, this is Agemonia. Again, I think just looking at my top 10 list, this is going to be 2021, the year of cooperative, narrative, campaign type games. I mean, we've seen a lot of them in the past, and I think the debate already is how many of these narrative games do I need? And so if you're going to be putting out one of these narrative games, which seem to be all of the trend right now, if you're going to be developing one, putting one out, marketing one, trying to get people to support one, what is going to make your game stand out? And Agemonia is another one of those where it's a cooperative fantasy-style narrative campaign game. Everything I can tell, it seems like it's going to be a dungeon crawler based on the Board Game Geek page. It basically says that you have a scenario map and your story points are triggered and you can be a good guy, you can be a bad guy, there's going to be lasting effects. You've got 3 different ways of mitigating, you know, ability checks, might, agility, and will. You roll dice, you can spend mana to sort of, you know, do magic as well. So it's hitting all the tropes already, but why this over whatever Awaken Realms put out? Because Awaken Realms is already going to get my money because I know they're a proven commodity. You have to show me something. You have to make the outstanding addition to this genre that I have not seen already. As I said in my trends video of 2021, all of these games are seeming so samey. You know, I'm trying to describe a game to you right now, and I'm having trouble being able to even distinguish it from other ones that are out there. That's a problem when I can't do that with your game. When I can't give you a synopsis that you can look back on later and say, oh yeah, that was clearly that game. You know, those forum thread games where people say, I'm going to describe a game and you tell me which one it is. Well, if you can't do that very concisely, you're probably not hitting the market target that you really want. Now, unlike a lot of the others on this list, Agemonia is actually scheduled for a February 2021 launch. So, you know, it's not too far around the corner. And I hope that we see some sort of more information. Shoot me information. Give me some way to set yourself apart from the crowd. I would love to see that. But, as you know, that's where my predilection lies in this type of game. So that's why it's made my list. That's why it's number 9. Now, number 8 is another different one. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I think is going to fly under the radar, and this is another one. This is another narrative, campaign, cooperative game, but this one takes a little bit different twist, and this is where I think it stands out a little bit. Just the name itself. Agemonia sounds very generic fantasy. Quantum Shock as number 8 right now. That name right there already starts you going, okay, you know, what's going to happen there? And then you describe it as a cooperative, survival, time manipulation type game. Well then, you know, you've got me more piqued, you know, okay, tell me more. So it's sci-fi horror. And again, there aren't many sci-fi horror games out there because, frankly speaking, I don't think sci-fi horror is that big of a hit with a lot of people. I think it has to be done very, very carefully not to sort of exclude people or get rid of potential consumers in the first place. It's sort of like horror movies. There's not a big market for horror movies. So what you see horror movies doing is masquerading as sort of other thrillers instead. And so you're getting the thriller market. And that's what you have to do with the board game side of things. So that's what I think this is sort of doing with the time twisting sort of campaign element. Now, it says on the Board Game Geek page that there's going to be 10 episodes. Each episode within this campaign is going to take you 90 to 120 minutes. So, you know, I mean, that's a good amount. That's not a terrible, crazy amount for all the, you know, replayability nerds like me out there. At the same time, I go, well, when's the next time I'm going to be able to play this game 10 times in a row anyway? So what does it really matter? But you would expect, if it was a typical Kickstarter, especially since this one appears to be miniature driven, that there will probably be stretch goals or expansions to give more campaigns. What I would like to see, though, is if they just did what Townsfolk Tussle did, and they said, boom, this is what you're getting, this is all you're getting, we're going to make it simple, we're going to make it straightforward, here's your $85 pledge level, and that's all it is, and boom, simplicity, no FOMO, there you go. That won't happen, but let's imagine 2021 could be better than 2020, right? Right. The other thing that they say with this, and I'll just put that out there, is they say that the modular map, you can rotate, you can twist, you can use it to find secret objectives, hidden information, things like that. So again, something to set it apart from everything else that's out there. And that's why it's number 8 right now. Number 7, and this one I almost left off the list because, frankly speaking, I almost forgot about it because it's sort of been under the radar, delayed, not really talked about, sort of pushed aside, and that is Mythic Battles Ragnarok. I have the Mythic Battles original. It's probably pound for pound the best one-on-one strategic miniature type war game that's out there on the market. At the same time, there is so much freaking content already. I sort of dread the Ragnarok campaign coming around because they were originally supposed to either give us more information or even have a date tentatively for like December 2020 as the original Kickstarter, and there were a whole bunch of delays from Mythic side of things. Monolith side of things, and they ended up delaying it. So I would imagine it's probably going to be, you know, just knowing how these things run, I would expect more quarter 2 from a Kickstarter campaign, which means, you know, probably middle to late of 2022 that you're actually going to get it. I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there about Mythic Battles Pantheon, and it's all of the Greek heroes. Now we're getting sort of the Nordic heroes and the Nordic pantheons, and sort of your Asgardian type thing. So, I mean, look at your Thors, look at your Asgard in general, and the Nine Realms, and Yggdrasil, as evidenced by Boom right there, sitting behind me. So that sort of thematic, and so it'd be interesting to see what differs, and how are they going to make it? Is it just going to be more of the exact same? I don't need more of the exact same. Neither do you. And so what, again, is going to be different? Because are there going to be new mechanics? Are they going to layer things on? How is it going to be comparable-wise in power creep versus the first season? I don't know. But again, if you put it out there, and it's going to be out there, it's going to be 7 figures easily. It's just how high, depending on how much, what the price point is, and then how much does it differ? Is this going to be one of those that's standalone where you say, okay, well, you can have this one or this one, and then some people like me who are returning backers go, I don't really need that one because it's the same thing? Or is it going to be, you know, that much different that you can have both, you can use both, and they're compatible? And that's what the hope is, and that's what the thought is behind that. But until push comes to shove, I'm not holding my breath. So that's why Mythic Battles Pantheon is number 7. Number 6 is one you may not also have heard of as well, but I think is worth mentioning. If you are not familiar with Sammy Lasko, you should be. If you like deck building games, you should be. Now, why am I mentioning him? Because he is the sole guy behind Dale of Merchants. Dale of Merchants being sort of this abstract, different take on how you deck build, because you're actually deck building by elimination, matching sets and laying them down and then having to rebuild. And Dale of Merchants, each theme is, you know, a creature deck, and then you throw a bunch of these creature decks together, and so depending on which creatures you have, they all sort of have different mechanisms in how they act. Some are take that, some are hoarding, some are manipulating your deck, some are manipulating other people's decks, and it's just a great, great game. I have the Dale of Merchants 3 on the way within the next month, I think, is when the Kickstarter is delivering. Well, there's sort of been this backlog, because he is basically a one-man band for the most part. I mean, he has some help, but he does a lot of it on his own. Well, there is a cooperative style game set in the overall world of Dale of Merchants that is cooperative, and this is Lands of Galzyr. The difference is this is more supposedly more sandboxy, more open world persistent, rather than storyline driven or linearly driven in one direction. Actions have consequences. There's a save mechanism. There's no pen and paper required. Not much beyond that is really known, except for the fact that it's been hyped and it's been, you know, sort of rumored for a while. It's sort of like one of those games, sort of like Iridia, sort of like, what's the other one? Seventh Cross. Spoiler. Also, I believe Transhumanity. These games that have sort of been nebulous out there floating around saying, when is it going to show up? When is it going to get more information? Nobody knows. And this is one of those that I really hope we get some more information for and even campaign for in 2021, because with the unique way that he has already taken to the deck building genre, I would love to see what his take is on an open sandbox world with, you know, consequences and storylines and impact that way. And plus, the artwork is fantastic. It's not for everybody, Dale of Merchants, but personally, I really like it. And I would encourage you to check out those games if you have any interest in that whatsoever, because you don't need all 3 like I'm going to have. If you got 1, it's more than enough. It's got 6 or 8 creatures in it. You get 2. I mean, it's plenty of combinations. You can do the factorial. So check it out. But that is why Lands of Galzyr is number 6. Number 5. Number 5 is sort of, these next 2 actually are going to be sort of bleh. And you'll understand what I mean by that in a second. Number 5 is whatever the heck CMON launches next. And rumor has it is it's going to be the animated trio block that they announced like a month or 2 ago of Teen Titans Go, Scooby-Doo, and Looney Tunes. And the question just is going to be is how is the pricing structure going to compare? Because all 3 of those games sort of look more like their CMON Limited side of things rather than their typical Kickstarter type games. The interesting thing is all 3 of those games, but especially the Looney Tunes and the Teen Titans Go, They just have a plethora of source information to gather from. And that's not to say Scooby-Doo doesn't have a lot, but there's only so much you can do with Scooby-Doo. It's not like, hopefully, you're going to be putting out like, 47 villains of Scooby-Doo and the same 5 mystery gang. I don't need that. That's going to be a pass, but I have to keep it on my radar because me and my family are big Scooby-Doo already. Teen Titans Go is a classic, and Looney Tunes is what I grew up on. So the question is, how, again, are you going to execute it? Is it going to be the typical CMON splash fest where you're, drowning in plastic? Or is it going to be more reserved, and is it going to be more moderate? Now, I think, obviously, based on their previous comic book campaign, where they put out some exclusives with these comic books, they allowed people to buy just one set. And so I think you're definitely going to see that, but obviously they're also going to try marketing-wise to get you in on all 3. So how are you going to do that? What is the price point going to look like? Because again, on face value, on the little information that's known, these appear to be more retail level size games. And I don't know how that's going to change. So I'll be interested to see. It's been a couple months since they've had a campaign. They usually have been like clockwork up until this year. And some of the logistical challenges, I believe Bloodborne is being shipped out right now. Marvel United is probably still 6 months off, as much as I wish it was actually March, like they said. Trudvang, they delayed that. Who knows when? You'll be lucky if you get that 2021, I think. So there's a lot of other stuff going on in the background, and I just don't know how that's going to affect the next product launch. Because otherwise, they probably would have launched it if they were by their typical cycle by now. But it's CMON, so again... So it's CMON, so again, eyeballs are going to be on it almost no matter what. For better or for worse, wherever you fall. Number 4. Number 4, I'm cheating here. I'll tell you right now, I'm cheating because we're going to go Primal the Monster Hunter. If you pay attention at all, you know what I already mean. So Primal the Awakening is one of the other big open world sandbox dungeon crawler monster hunter in all but name. And then you also have Monster Hunter the World board game being launched by Steamforged Games. Primal was supposed to be before the end of 2020. Things got delayed. Steamforged Games just ran up with Bard Song. And so you know it's going to be a couple months at least before they launch their next one. Probably 3 or 4. If their pattern holds true. There's about 4 or 5, I think, between ones in the past. Give or take. So what's going to happen is I have a feeling... And honestly, I hope this happens. Initially, if you think about it, you're like, oh, I don't want them to run head-to-head. You do want them to run head-to-head because then you can compare them immediately. The worst fear is that you have them completely not overlap. So when you're looking at the first one, whichever one it is, you don't know what the second one is going to look like. So do you go in and risk that it's going to be not as good as the first one? Or do you go in hoping that it's just going to blow the second one out of the water? And it's sort of a game of chicken, if you will, because... if somebody goes first, the second person always has the chance to make changes if they see that things are not well received or things aren't quite as good as they wanted them to be. Now, again, that puts your product later, but maybe if it's even later launching on the Kickstarter, you're further ahead in production and development. That would be the hope. That's the whole purpose of Kickstarter, is that you further along. Anyway, so... who knows what's going to happen? Personally, we know nothing about Monster Hunter the World. We know at least a little bit about Primal the Awakening. We haven't seen anything on Steamforged sides of things with Monster Hunter the World, the board game. We know Primal Awakening has the artwork out there. We've seen some of the mechanisms. There's been a couple videos by some other YouTubers and previewers, even the King of Average, in terms of some of the information. So there is stuff out there on that, but it's piecemeal. When are we going to get big chunks? And I would love to be one of those people that can present with you a prototype, a playthrough, a review. They're not going to send it to me. They've already said that. I asked. But, you know, I'm still going to cover it because I'm super hyped about it because it just looks amazing. It looks like Kingdom Death, the Monster Hunter version. And as difficult as KDM is to get to the table, I'm really interested. And I think it's, again, it's a niche game that sets itself apart. But which is going to be better? Steamforged right now, but again, just like with CMON, everything Steamforged does is going to get the eyeballs. Whether you like them or not, those are the similarities between those two companies. They're putting out big name products, they get a lot of eyeballs, and they raise a lot of money with a lot of plastic. Whether or not it's for you and whether or not it's any good, though, That's what you have to decide. Anyway, that's why that is number 4. So number 3, again, this is a little known game that may not raise the 7 figures. Some of these other titles may be able to get at the drop of a hat, but this is one that I think deserves it because of the quality products that have been put out in the past by the one and only Tristan Hall. This is Sublime Dark. This is the latest and next upcoming game from All or Nothing Productions. You may know All or Nothing Productions from other games: Lifeform, Gloom of Kilforth, 1066, Tears of Many Mothers, the latest Veilwrath. All of these games are very well thought of. They're very well in terms of production. The artwork is... and the consistency is applaudable. The interesting thing, though, and the dynamic here, is that most of those games I mentioned, they're really... even Gloom of Kilforth, which is really 1 to 4 players, if you read the reviews out there from most of the people, it is either a solo game or it's a 2-player game because everything gets significantly more with 3 or 4. And those other games that I mentioned, Lifeform, I think is a little bit more of a 3 or 4 game because it's basically more Nemesis-esque worker placement type with the alien theme. And then the other 1066 and Veilwrath are, you know, more 1 or 2 player games strictly. So this game, Sublime Dark, is different because this is, again, marketed as a 1 to 4 player game. Have you seen a theme with this video yet? This is a cooperative horror storytelling game where you are in the city of Blackfell. And you're just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. It's creepy, it's dark, it's horror genre encapsulated in a board game. You don't know where you are. You don't know what type of place this is. You're not sure anything. And so that's what you're trying to figure out. The page on Board Game Geek says each scenario links to the next one, and you're going to get a little bit more of a clue about what's going on in the overall narrative because it's not known. You're going to get more mechanisms, you're going to get more mechanics and new game elements as you progress until you finally get a bigger picture of what you're supposed to be doing and what you're trying to do to even beat the game in the first place, it sounds like. So it's a game that is already capturing my imagination. I think it's very anticipated. The question just is it going to be for me? Because I was an original backer of the first Gloom of Kilforth, and I just found that it was not for me, especially as a multiplayer game. So, again, I think the potential is high. Now, whether it's going to meet my expectations in terms of what I like personally, that remains to be seen. Ain't that true of all Kickstarters, though? So this is nothing new in that sense. But it should be on your radar if any of those words again, or any of these other games on the list sound of interest. This one should be as well. So, number 2 and number 1. Coin flip, you know, between number 2 and number 1. Honestly, as I'm doing this video, I think I'm going to swap them. I think I'm going to swap them just because I am not completely sure number 2 is even going to come out in 2021 on Kickstarter because it's been delayed for so long already and we just don't know anything more about it, and there's been no tentative even discussion about firmly going to be in 2021. And it's the one I already mentioned in this video. It is 7th Cross. This is sort of becoming a grail game in terms of anticipation by Level 99 Games. What is this game? If you've ever seen Vampire Hunter D, or if you want to go with the more classically known Castlevania, it is that as an open world dungeon crawler, exploration, roguelike campaign miniature game, thrown in with the element of Tales of Arabian Nights and Betrayal at House on the Hill. That is the self-description on the Board Game Geek page. They did characters from it in an earlier season of Exceed, their one-on-one tactical battler. So the lore has been around for years. Information on this actual game, though, has been very sparse. Just like with Castlevania, you are a church hunter trying to seed out the evil that is in the world, especially with monsters. And it is their take on things. And if it is anything like what we have seen them come out with in the past in terms of the differences and the standout mechanisms and the uniqueness, I will be backing all in on day one. But like I said, there has been little information about the firm timetable of this. And so just for that reason, it's not going to occupy the #1 spot. I was set to make this list and have it be #1. But as I'm doing this video, I literally cannot commit to that because I just don't know enough. I just don't know enough. And I can see being let down again, because this was the year that it was supposed to launch too. And it hasn't. So hopefully it will be next year. The lore behind it, the thematic elements, the campaign, the open world, the crawling nature of it is all right up my alley. As a level 99 fanboy, that has to be of high interest. So it will demand my attention right away. It's just, when is it actually going to get my attention? And who knows? So what is #1 on this list? #1 on this list is the other one that all the big boys are going to be paying attention to. It's Kickstarter campaign for just the models just finished. This is Sankokushin, 5 Sacrifices. Again, fully cooperative game with narrative elements that actions have consequences down later the line. And this is a unique theme. It has a medieval Japan theme. And if you know anything for the other videos that I've done, I am a sucker for medieval Japan. Now, if you also watched my other video talking about that, medieval Japan has not had very good success in terms of gameplay and game development. Shadow Tactics, is running a second Kickstarter campaign to fund their first Kickstarter, essentially, because it still hasn't delivered. Onimaru is turning out to be a sweet mess. Excuse the pun for the people who ordered Sweet Mess from the same company and aren't going to get those copies anytime soon. And so the track record is just not good for that theme, but it already looks amazing. This is a miniature company diving into the dungeon crawl tabletop board game scene. And from the information that's out there, it just looks fantastic. Again, I've reached out to them, but I'm not going to be big enough that they're going to be of interest, probably sending me anything. I've sort of been under the radar, we'll say, by their PR people. So I would love it if they would. So, hey, another opportunity. Hey, I'm going to talk about you, and please give me more information so I can show all my viewers information too. But that is why it's #1 for that reason. It just looks freaking fantastic. It has more of the KDM element, that it's going to have a psychological factor, but also a physical tactical factor in your battles. You have the ability to not only kill your enemies, but have them sort of de-escalated or find another way to stop them from a psychological standpoint. Which again, you're looking for that factor that sets you apart. And they've got it so far with all the things I've mentioned. There's more information on the Board Game Geek page than a lot of the other games that I've mentioned. They've said there's 10 bosses. All of these 10 bosses are unique. They all have their own intellect. They all have their own AI. They all interact with you in a different way. How you deal with them will reverberate, taking this word for word from the page, through the campaign. So if you kill them, one thing's going to happen. If you friend them, another thing is going to happen. Their behavior, their attitudes, how they interact with you may change depending on how you interact with them. Are you a heads down D&D, I hit anything that comes near me? Or are you open to exploration and exploring other avenues of attack? They also make it very clear that the city that this is based in, over a 12-month period, you are going to be heavily interacting with the inhabitants of the city. So not just the bosses, not just the bad guys, but the good guys and the neutral parties as well. And how you interact with them will be fully fleshed out in that same capacity. And that you will not be able to experience all of it in just one playthrough. They also make it very clear that it is not going to be a simple linear path, yes, no. It is going to be more complex than that. It's also not going to be a paragraph of text reading every time either. So, for all of those reasons, that is why it has surpassed Seventh Cross on my list of most anticipated Kickstarters of 2021. What do you think? What am I missing? I mean, there's a dozen other games that could have been at the tail end of this. There's a dozen other games that I'm not talking about. There's a dozen other games that I probably don't even know about that would probably beat a couple of these out, or a couple of these probably won't even launch in 2021, or even the first half of 2021. So what's going to be out there? No one knows. Everybody wants to know. I want to know as much as everybody else. So let's talk about it. Let's find out what we can, and let's break it down as it comes. So I'm going to be trying to put out, you know, maybe not weekly, but bi-weekly, what's coming up on Kickstarter, what should you be looking out for, and what should you spend your money on. So if that interests you at all, throw me a sub. I want to get bigger. If you guys can support me so that some of these companies then will send me stuff so that I can send you stuff. So if you can support me in that way, that would be the best thing that you could do. So as always, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time, and stay classy.